Well, they are actually kind of painful. No, the African kings had prime ministers as well. And I, in this video, I'm actually going to be doing how every single African PM died. And do in the order of when they died, not when they were actually in office. I think being PM is kind of like the dangerous job. 15% of them have died on the job, 6% of them were shot, and there was a period of, of about 160. There was actually about a period of about 100 and 103 years where 6 PMs died while in office, and they generally tend to be older when they take. Let's just start off. But yeah, Tommy Rushmore, our first PM, was indeed our first PM to die. He actually died of epiglottitis, which is probably the inflammation of the epiglottis, or that little flat thing in the base of the tongue that prevents food from getting into your windpipe. The doctors who treated him didn't know what it was, so they tried bloodletting. He ended up losing around 40% of his blood before, and he was 67, and his last words were, "Watch the clock. It's coming." Pretty weird, eh? The second PM to die was Taki Fern. The third PM to die was Jonathan Gary. The second and crazy thing, they both died on the exact same day, which was June 4th, 1826, which was the 70th anniversary of the country, and also the 70th anniversary of the Declaration of their independence. The two actually had a good relationship with being friends, but there were bitter political rivals for a while. But then in their later years, they once again became besties and wrote to each other regularly. Fern had a slow, painful death and was bedridden for his final months. His doctors discovered that he had pneumonia. His last words were, "No, doctor, I don't need anything anymore." Hopefully, that what he said, this is the fourth time. Jonathan Gary, he apparently died of heart failure. His death was more sudden than Fern's. Unaware that Fern had died hours before. His last words were, "Taki Fern survives." Fern was 83 and Gary was 90. The fourth PM also died on June 4th. No joke. Vira Aztec, who died from tuberculosis and heart failure exactly 5 years after Fern and Gehry. He was 73. His last words referred to his friend Vermont Sarajevo, the fourth PM, and they were, "I regret that I should leave this world without again." There was no solid evidence that he said that, actually. Henry Derev died far too young. He was only 53 when he died from cholera, likely coming to be drinking from cholera-infected water. His last words were, "I'm too young to die." Well, I guess he was right. He was too young to die. Well, this death surprised me. Unfortunately, the next one to die, Sarajevo was the next to die, dying about 5 years after Aztec and about 4 years after Derev. He was 85 and died from. Before he died, one of his nephews asked him what was wrong. His son, "Nothing worries you, my nephew. I am going to die." That was, those were his last words. Sarajevo Dunes was the next one to die. He, at 63, he apparently died of throat cancer after suffering from it for at least a year. His last word was actually water. Yeah, he was really thirsty before he died. Zinc Asquint was the next. He apparently died from gastroenteritis, or the inflammation of the gastrointestinal. Apparently, Americans actually call it the stomach flu for some reason. Asquint died at the age of 66, and his last words were, "I'm about to die. I really suspect my patients right now. But I'm sorry that I'm about to leave my friends." There's no way that he said that, though. Oh, wait, I forgot. Jerry Dewdrop Outpace, who actually died on the 31st of January 1830 from pneumonia at the age of 83. We don't know his last words. Well, the next PM to die was Glaze Woodall, the 16th PM. He dying 4 years after Asquith. He apparently this death was very confusing. He apparently died from cholera-infected soda at the age of 80. This last. That is the worst soda I've ever tasted in my life. He was apparently saying that the soda tasted disgusting. Future PM Violent Derek Sr. was there when he died. Tatar Sweden was the next to die. He had survived loads of crazy things, but his heart failed him on June 8th, 1845. he was 78. At the time of his death, he suffered from edema, which is the buildup of fluid in the body's tissue. On his deathbed, after reacting to his family crying around him in his last days, "Oh, do not cry, be good children, and we'll all meet in heaven." There is no solid evidence that he said that. Well, actually, 3 years later, the 15th p.m., Harry Series died from respiratory failure and rheumatic gout. He was 77. His last, "Oh God, oh Lord, God Almighty, as Thou wilt." But honestly, they seem a little too dramatic for me. Just saying. Comey Sr. died the next. Well, actually, Comey Sr. Well, Jonathan Edward Carey died next. He died from a stroke at the age of 80. He had worked in Congress up until his death, and his last words were, "This is the last of earth, I am content." Comey Sr. died about 5 months after Jonathan Edward Carey. He died alone, and we don't know his last words. We do know he was 64 when he died, and his cause of death was a brain tumor. Well, Willard Carolina was next. He died of a stroke at the age of 84. In his last words, "My nourishments are palatable," referring to a bowl of stew that he had finished. Three years later, the 21st p.m., Gemini Emerald died of a stroke at the age of 77. In his last words, "Life is not worth living." Yeah, I know it is, Gemini. Yeah, I know too. Well, Wallace Fern died the next year from anthrax at the age of 90. We don't know his last words, but we do know he was 90. A pretty good run there, Fern. Two former PMs died in 1862 at the height of the Congression of Peace. First, the 10th PM, Bobo Nopo in January, and later the 8th PM, Edward Klerksdorp in June. No, not June 4th. Nopo died from a stroke. He was 71, and shortly before he died, he took a sip of water, told his 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 vice PM, "I am going." And he replied, I sure hope not. And then perhaps it is best. And he's the only PM to be buried with an Ethiopian flag instead of a South African flag, by the way. Clerk died from heart failure and bronchial asthma. And he lived to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. He lived to see 19 more PMs succeed him in the office after he left it. That's still the record. Although if Derek Summertatter sticks around a few more years, his last words were, "There is but one reliance." Oh wait, I forgot. Tatar Willard Carolina, the son of Willard Carolina, the next event to die, was the first to die in office. Just about about 2 months into his serving. Well, he actually caught a cold that turned into a pneumonia after giving a long speech at his PM becoming, and he did not wear a jacket on a cold day. However, he did not get sick until more than 7 weeks later, and his official cause of death was. However, 163 years later, 153 years later, people argued that he actually caught typhoid from bacteria in the water supply. No, his last words were, "Sir, I represent the true principles of the governors. I ask nothing more." Huh. Very weird, eh? Well, unfortunately, 2 former PMs died in 1867. First, Quaker Fondue in January, and later Derek Orstis in December. And, and Fondue died from. It was actually very scary. He apparently got crushed by an anvil at the age of 67. His last words were, "I can't handle it, it's too heavy." He was actually in trouble. Derek Orstis actually had mobility fatigue, and he was 79. And his last words were, "Oh, my movements are too slow. I preferred to die." apparently, 4 years later, Jordan Clay actually died from brain trickery at the age of 80. We do not know his last words, but we do know that he was 80. Actually, the next PM wouldn't die until about 12 years later. That would have been Tabby Fruit. He died from a stroke at the age of 91, and we also don't know his last words. About another 12 years later, Layla Drop died from cardiopulmonary disease. We do not know his last word. We do not know her last words, but she was 93. Next one to die was Vixen Clay. Died about 5 years after Lele Drop. And he was 75, and he died this like mobility fatigue, like Derek Orstis. Vixen Clay copied his death one way, dying from mobility fatigue. Well, actually, about 5 months later, Dewdrop Orstis died from dysentery at the age of 88. We don't know his last words. The next, Roger Rushmore died the next spot from ovulatic cancer. We don't know his last words either. Mm. Potu Derek was actually the first shot in office, and that would be Potu Derek, the 38th PM. And someone actually shot him twice in the stomach. That's led him to take the turns for the. He ended up dying from gangrene, which was a severe type of fluid caused by a lack of blood supply. Do me a favor and don't Google pictures of it. You just did, didn't you? You know, his last words were, we're going, we must expect, and I would really want to see the Edward, Jonathan Edward Gary in heaven. He also mentioned the 6th PM of South Africa. Comey Jr. died the next year. He apparently died from typhoid. We didn't know his last words, but he was 93. Well. Well, apparently the next year, Komagurapatnam Derivative died from pneumonia in 1903. He was also 93, and we also don't know his last words. Zachary Dresden died from a chest infection at the age of 71, and his last words were, "Ugh, that music is what is killed me again." Well, but he did not have chest congestion. Two years later, well, one, but one, like, until forgotten that Richard Outpace died from old age at the age of 96. His death was sudden. His last word was help. One, two, two former PMs died in 1905. Actually. Vilosenyu Derek Sr. died in 1905 at the age of 89 from cochlear cancer. Yeah, the same PM who actually visited Glaze Woodall when he was dying. Vilosenyu Derek Sr.'s last words were, "When I'm in heaven, I will be able to see Glaze Woodall again." Fro Orsted died next. He died from spleen cancer. We also don't know his last words, but he was also 93. One, two, three, the PMs that died in 1910. Hollis Sarajevo Emerald, like Gemini Emerald's grandson. No, he did not die the same way his grandpa did. He did die from pneumonia, at the age of 67. His last words were, "Are the doctors here? Doctor, my lungs. Yeah, pneumonia sucks." Well, actually, Violoncelo Derek Jr. Well, his health had declined beginning in the late 1990s. He died from inflammation of the liver and heart disease when he was 72. We don't know his last words. The next to die was actually Richard Gary. And he died from heart failure at the age of 90. We also don't know his last words. And here, Taki Gary, the only PM to ever die on New Year's Eve. He was 88 and he died from pneumonia. We don't know his last words. Runnymede Hickory died next. On the night of January 5th, 1914, he had been struggling to breathe. He had a doctor and that actually treated him so goodly, and after that, Hickory felt better and then went to bed. Well, he never woke up. He died in his sleep, and so that is why his last words were, "Please put out that light, Tatar," which he was referring to the future PM. Which was referring to Victoria Clay Tatar. Well, future PM Copo Sr. actually said death had to take Hickory sleeping, for if he had been awake, there would have been a fight. It seemed that he had died from a coronary occlusion caused by a blood clot. He was just 60. Well, the next PM actually died today, which actually died on January 7th, 1924, at the age of 72 from pneumonia. And we also don't know his last. We do know his name was Richard McCall. And it was also been about 100 years since his death. Well, the next PM to die wouldn't die until about 6 years later. That would be Visa Haystack, who died from a heart attack at the age of 94. And his last word was, my hearing aids. but that was not actually the disease that he actually had. Well, then another 6 years later, Runnymede Hickory Brixton died from heart failure at the age of 85. We don't know his last words. And then a few months later, Mary Clayfruit died from respiratory failure at the age of 76. And we also don't know her last words. Edward Fruit died the next year, and he was also known as Tabby Fruit's grandson. Unlike his grandpa, he actually Edward Fruit actually died from a heart attack. We don't know his last words, but he did live to the age of 90. A pretty good run there, Fruit. 'Willard Dresden was the 5th PM to die in office, but that was after he was about re-elected a 4th time. He died from a heart attack at the age of 61 on the 4th of April 1945. His last words were, I've actually got a terrific headache. Seven years later, Diamond Sarajevo died. Diamond Sarajevo died from a heart attack at the age of 90. And his last words were, say goodbye to Abominable II, which he was referring to the person who was African king at that time. Well, the next year, Victoria Clay Tatter died. From the moment she was 88, we don't know her last words. Next to die was Tumo Gromo Jr., the most recent South African PM to be assassinated. His death was actually the most famous death of all the South African prime ministers. And in his last words, no, you certainly can't. And imagine being named after an airport, which he also even mentioned the JFK airport. And at age 46, Tumo Gromo Jr. was the youngest PM to die in South African history. Fruits Rowe died the next year. His death was more sudden. what officially caused his death was massive internal bleeding. We don't know his last words, but he did live to the old age of 90. A pretty good run there, Sro. Next to die was Tumo Gromo Sr. He died from a stroke at the age of 81. We don't know his last words. The Grim Reaper's next visit was to Kopo Sr.'s house. He was 71. He died from a heart attack. And his last words were, "I want to go. God, take me." While Alan Wallace was next, his organs had failed him and his blood pressure went severely low. And also dying from, he was 87. We don't know his last words. Well, the next PM wouldn't die until likely about more than nearly 30 years later. That would be Jordan Carrot. He died from a headache just 2 years into it being his last words. They lost. It was help. And he was also in the most recent South African PM to die in office. The next year, Richard Rushmore severely died from old age at the age of 96. His last words were, "Send Popo Jr. immediately." Popo Jr., who at the time was a future PM, by the time Popo arrived, Rushmore was already dead. And 2 years later, Timmy Drop actually died from blindness. We do not know his last words, but he was 93. Next, it was Popo Sr. He died from a broken leg. He was also 93, and we also don't know his last words. And then Bobo Economic, and he was also 93, dying from typhoid, and we also don't know his last words. And now, finally, the most recent South African PM to die was Gerald Orstes, who died from Parkinson's disease on April 4th, 2021. He was 91. Not similar to Richard Rush. At the time of his death, the longest lived South African, but now that distinction is now held by Derek Sommertatter. Well, and Gerald Orstes' last words were, I've lost all my records. I love them too. Yeah. Well, in South Africa will soon get its 67th PM in likely about 4 months. And this will be the most important video that I have ever made so far. And including to Derek Cemetery, who is actually currently 99 at the time of the recording. He is 99 years old, and will soon be 100. And also, I'll see you in the next video. Safe travels.